Okay there guys, welcome back to ARTFX Tutorial Tuesday, Season 2 about Glitch Hop. Last week I talked about how to make a typical Glitch Hop kick drum. It sounds like this. It's a pretty good kick drum, but there's a lot more that we need to do, and this week I want to talk about how to make a Glitch Hop snare drum. So I'm gonna try and explain to you how to make those typical Koan Sound snare drums. I mean, Koan Sound his snare drums, or Koan Sound their snare drums, because there are two people, sound really like a style on their own. The drums have a really big thump in your chest when they really hit you when they're played on a loud system. So there are some tricks to making a snare like that. Before I start, I actually want to show you a little bit more about what I already talked about in last week's video, and I do think that I've got a little bit more to say about it right now, and for everyone who hasn't seen the first video, this might be a little bit of you know, something to think about before actually going into the production. During the first season of tutorials, when I was making the Electro House season, the first two videos were about making the kick drum and the snare drum. And a lot of people complained that I wasn't actually showing how to make the snare drum and kick drum. Now, I have my reasons, and I will tell you now what those reasons are. Making a kick drum and a snare drum is quite a time-consuming task, and when you want to make a lot of music, and when you want to make a lot of good music, there's no way you're gonna have the amount of time that you need to make these sounds from scratch every time again you're making a track. So that's one thing why I'm not showing you how to make it all the way from scratch, because I don't do that with every track I make. To be honest, there are only a few times where I've actually spent an entire day making a snare drum or a kick drum from scratch. All the other times, I just pick a sample that is pretty close to what I'm looking for, and then I'm going to work on that to make it exactly how I want it. And that will save you so much more time, and you will have so much time left to actually spend on the production of the track itself. So there is nothing wrong with making a kick drum or a snare drum from scratch. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, and if you want to do that, then feel free to do it. I mean, you're definitely going to learn something from it, and it will only benefit you. But when you get an idea, and you want to put that idea down into your software as fast as possible, then you don't want to be sitting around like 2 hours making a kick drum and a snare drum before you can actually continue putting out that idea that you have. You want to be able to just take a good kick drum and a good snare drum, load them up into your software and start making the track itself, and then you can always go back and adjust the kick drum and snare drum. But if the kick drum and snare drum are like a standard 909 kick and snare, then the idea you're going to put into it is most likely not going to sound the way you want it. And if you're going to start with a kick drum and a snare drum that you've already made yourself, then you're definitely going to be happy with those kick and snares. So the idea will come a lot more naturally, and it will not kill your actual creativity and the idea that you have in your mind. So what I found out is when I don't do this and I get to the point I have an idea in my head and I want to put it into my software, then I most of the times just get lost along the way when I'm making the kick and snare, and I forget about the actual idea that I have. You know, to counterattack that, I decided that just take one particular day in the week, and that will be your sound design day. You will spend a couple of hours, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever you want on that particular day every week, making samples. You will not be making a track. during that day, you will just be making samples. Then you save all those samples to your library, and whenever you got an idea, you can go into that library, take the samples you need, and go on with the idea. Put it into your software and really make that track, and then you can go back, change the kick and snare to what you really want and what really suits the idea, but you have something to work with, and that is going to be a lot more easy. So that being said, let's go on with making the snare drum. So sample selection is a really big thing. I can make a 909 snare from nothing. I can make a glitch hop snare from a 909 snare. You know, just starting with a basic 909 that sounds nothing like a real glitch hop snare drum that Koan Sound uses, for instance, but I could make it, you know. It's gonna take me a long time, but I will get there, eventually. And for this particular thing, like now I'm gonna do this tutorial, I don't want to be spending hours making that snare drum. So that's where sample selection kicks in. You need to think about this. You can make a 909 into something that is a lot more closer to a glitch hop snare, and then make a glitch hop snare from that sample that you've processed, so that processed 909, and you will get there, but it's gonna take you a long time. So instead, I will choose a sample that is already a lot closer to what I need. And by doing that, you basically just skip a lot of the first couple of steps. And by doing that, you will, you know, really speed up your workflow and save yourself a lot of time. So I've already done that. I've already took some samples. These first two are coming from a forum. I actually found them on a forum called NeuroHub Forum, or NeuroHub Forum, and I'll try to find the actual topic in that forum and put it in the description below so you can download these same samples if I can find the topic. But these samples are pretty good. I mean, I've just took a couple of ones from the packs that I downloaded, but this is the main snare that we're gonna use. Let's bring up the volume a little bit. I don't know why, but it sounds a little bit more quiet than the kick drum. Okay, that's too much. That is the main snare. Now, this is a typical processed 909 snare. I mean, it's not something really special. It's just a big snare, but it's already processed, and this is already what I want. So the next one is an acoustic snare drum. Sounds like this. It has that really ringing till on the actual sample, which I really like, you know. I like that till on this particular sample. And then last but not least, I've got a clap from the Thomas Penton Essentials series, volume 3, I think. You can use any kind of clap that you want. It's not gonna be a main sound in this snare. It's just gonna be a little bit of a top layer that's gonna fill in the high end. So that being said, let's get started. The first thing I want to do is take down the release times for all of these 3 samples. Why do I do this? Because when you take down the release time, you can actually shorten the notes in the MIDI clip, and the sample will only play during the length of the note. So when I solo the main snare, that one, and I play it right now, you're gonna hear the full sample. But when I make it really short, you're only gonna hear the first part of it. So now I can just, you know, take it to where I think sounds good. And I think right around there sounds pretty damn good. it already sounds a little bit more like a glitch hop snare drum. Now glitch hop snare drums are really short in general, so long fading tails are most of the time not gonna work that well. So that sounds pretty good, but glitch hop snare drums can range from 200 to 250 Hertz or sometimes even higher. Now I found out that most of the times a 200 Hertz snare drum, and with 200 Hertz I mean that the peak of the actual snare is at 200 Hertz. Sometimes I find that to be a little bit too low for funky sounding glitch hop, and when you analyze tracks by Koan Sound, you can hear that his snares are most of the time peaking a little bit higher than 200 Hertz. We're talking about a range from 230 to up to 280 or sometimes even higher. So fireworks outside, nice. It's not even Christmas. The first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna raise the pitch of the first sample. So now it sounds like this. I've raised it with 3 semitones, and now it sounds like this. So we've gone from this, which is more of like a dubstep snare, and I put it 3 semitones up and you get that. Sounds a lot better. But there is a lot we need to do. Let's put in an EQ8 after the hard snare sampler or simpler. I don't know, what is it? It's a simpler. And now we can actually see where the snare is peaking. Now, if you're not on Ableton Live 9, if you're on 8 or versions before that, you can actually throw in the spectrum after the EQ and you will have the same kind of view. As you can see, it's pretty similar and both work in the same way. With Live 9 you now have the built-in spectrum in the EQ, which is really powerful and really useful. I really like that. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna high pass at 100 Hertz, because I don't think we need anything below 100 Hertz. Then I'm going to look at the spectrum and see where my snare is peaking. Now it is peaking at about this line, which I think it's about 280 or 285 maybe. Maybe 290. So this snare is now peaking at 290. So, 290 Hertz. Now 290 Hertz is actually pretty high. I don't think I've made that many snares that were that high in pitch, but it is going to work, and I'm going to show you. So what we're now going to do is we want to enhance that peak in the actual snare. We want to make it more pronounced. So I'm going to turn up the Q of this second point that I just placed on 290 Hertz, and I'm going to make the Q about 4.2, 4.3, about there. I don't know. Don't make it too sharp, because then the actual peak in your snare will start to ring instead of pronouncing it, and I don't know, it's not what I'm looking for. So now what we can do is start bringing up the gain a little bit and see how it sounds. So we've gone from this to this. Now you can hear that the peak is really becoming a lot more pronounced. What we could do is lower this a little bit. So now we are actually making the peak wider and not pronouncing it. So that's a different thing you could do, because I'm now actually boosting the frequencies that are just before the peak of the snare, and by doing that I'm basically widening up the peak. Right before that peak, there's still a lot of frequency content, so when I'm going to boost that, I am gonna get a little bit more low frequencies in the actual thump of the snare drum. And that works. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't, but for this one, it actually works pretty well. Maybe raise it up even further. And, you know, it will add some more of that punch. I think that works really well. So now I'm going to lower the mids a little bit. So this sounds pretty decent. It's pretty good. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the second snare. And this one is a little bit more ringing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shorten the length of this one. Make it the same length as, or maybe even shorter. So now it sounds like that. Let's raise this up 2 semitones. And I'm going to bring in some more release. So it doesn't really stop immediately. It, you know, takes a little bit of time to actually drop down to 0 dB. So you get a little bit more of a fade out on that snare. I think 2 semitones sounds pretty good. Now, I can make this a little bit longer if I want. And let's listen to the main snare and the acoustic snare together. So, it did fill out the acoustic one pretty well. That's the main snare without the acoustic one, and this is with the acoustic one. One thing though that I find that happens is the attack of the acoustic snare makes the attack of the main snare a little bit too loud. So we need to get rid of this attack portion. I can do that by going to the volume tab right here and bringing up the attack time. I'm gonna solo the attacks. I'm gonna solo the acoustic snare. So now we're left with just a tail. Layer that with the main snare. It's gonna sound a little bit better. Maybe bring those highs a little bit back. And maybe I've gone a little bit too far. Yeah, it sounds better. We're gonna make that actual thump a lot more pronounced later on this video. So now for the last one is a clap. Let's go into here, and we can see that this clap has that weird start in front of the sample. I'm gonna let it start right around here. So now it sounds like that. Let's shorten the length. That sounds good. And I'm gonna high pass this. So I'm gonna put on a high pass 12 and take down the frequency to about 1K. Let's see how that sounds. Sounds pretty okay. Maybe a little bit of attack. To make some room for the thump of the snare drum. Now together, everything together, it sounds like this. So that is already a lot better than what we started with. So now I can open up this, and I'm gonna take down both of these. And this is the main snare. So now I'm gonna add in a little bit of the clap. I'm doing this just to, you know, get a little bit more high end in the actual final snare drum. That little bit of high end will help to make the snare punch through your mix. Now another thing I can do is raise the high frequencies on the clap a little bit. That will actually help to make it punch through the mix even further, even better. And now I'm gonna go put an EQ on the acoustic snare. And let's solo it for a moment. There is quite some low end in here, so I'm gonna put on high pass and get rid of that low end. And let's make those ringing frequencies a little bit more pronounced by doing that. So now the main snare sounds like this. I can lower the volume of the acoustic one a little bit if I want. And there you have it. It's basically a pretty good snare now. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna throw on an EQ8, and I'm going to put this at 285, and I'm gonna, you know, raise the gain a little bit more. Now I'm gonna bring down the mids a little bit. And I'm going to high pass it again. So that sounds pretty okay. So now I'm gonna add a compressor. And with this compressor I can actually control the overall transients of the sound. I can control the way the sample is treated in terms of volume. So I took off the makeup gain, and then I'm going to lower the threshold quite a bit and see what we're ending up with. Let's raise the attack time a little bit. And now you can actually start hearing that snare punch through a little bit more. Now it's the release time. And I can switch to this one to actually see what is happening. So I think this sounds pretty good. So now I'm going to add a favorite plugin of mine, which is Shock Audio's Transient Shaper. Throw it on afterwards. Let's see, I'm gonna turn up the drive a little bit. Now that will lower the actual volume of the sample, of the sound, or of the track that you put it on, but it will not seem to sound quieter. If you look at the volume meter that is before the transient shaper, you can see that this sample, this track, is peaking above 0 dB. It's clipping a little bit. But after it, we actually have 2 or 3 dB of headroom. So now I can take the attack and turn the attack up a little bit. Then it's gonna make our attack seem a bit more louder, a bit more powerful. And now comes the magic part, and that is saturating the snare drum. So I'm going to put on a saturator and turn on soft clipping, which is going to make sure that nothing exceeds 0 dB. And now I can actually drive the input to so now we made the snare drum a lot better. Playing around with the release times on the compressor will really help to control that ringing part in the snare that is coming from the acoustic layer. I can also lower the acoustic one a little bit. I might want to drop in some more attack. By doing that, I can actually raise the volume of the acoustic snare, and I will still get most of the volume from the hard snare. So the clap So we have a pretty good snare drum actually, but I don't know. It sounds a lot more quieter than the kick drum. Well, maybe it doesn't. I think it sounds pretty good. Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, we've now made a pretty good snare drum. That is a really good snare drum. I can, you know, change the lengths a little bit. Maybe it's a little bit too long. Yeah. This sounds a lot better. One thing I like to do is just add in a little bit of release time to smooth out those actual tails of the sample. Otherwise the sample is going to be cut off immediately when the note ends, and this will, you know, make it sound a little bit more natural. Now, I'm not totally happy with this sample, to be honest. I've made better ones, but maybe I can It's all about controlling the overall volume of the 3 samples individually to create a snare drum that is gonna sound good when all the layers are being put together. So now we've done this, I have a good snare drum. It sounds okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. Let's turn the volume to 0 dB, and I'm gonna go out of full screen mode for a moment, and I'm gonna go to File, Export, and Normalize is turned on. It's not really needed for this one right now, but it's useful. You know, if your samples are not peaking exactly at 0 dB, then using the normalize function will make sure that your samples are exactly at 0 dB after the export. So I'm gonna select the drum track, this track, the drum rack, check my settings, wave, sample rate, that's all fine, and then I'm gonna press OK. It's gonna ask where I want to save the actual sample, so let's call this one snare 20, and I'm gonna hit save. So now it has saved the actual sample, and I can go into the folder where I've got these samples. It's this particular folder, and I do want to talk a little bit about this. It's called the ARTFX EDM Essentials Volume 1, and it's a sample pack I'm working on currently, and I want to release this sample pack on my website very soon. It's going to be available for purchase. It's not going to cost really that much, but it's basically a pretty complete pack. There's drum hits, I've got some bass hits, some bass loops that I made myself. I've got multiple kinds of different drum hits. I've got some drum loops. There are 3 multi-sampled instruments in here that are going to be mapped to sampler patches and are ready to use within Ableton Live. I've got some random recordings in here, some sound effects and some sound effect loops. I'm gonna add some more of these, but you know, I'm not done making the sample pack yet. I've got some synth hits. I've got some synth loops. There's gonna be some vocal hits in here, and I've got some vocal loops in here. And right now the pack is about 400 MB. I'm gonna make it more. I don't know how much it's gonna be actually, but I don't want to make it too big. But you know, I think it's gonna work. Now let's see. Let's go to drum hits and go to the snares folder where I just saved our snare drum, and let's drop the volume a little bit. There we have him. That's the snare. So now I can take away this drum rack, and I'm gonna place this snare on my snare track, and there you have it. So that was it for this week's video. Next week I'm gonna go into the actual production of percussion loops, and these percussion loops are gonna be really relying a lot on groove, because I think that groove in glitch hop, especially in funky glitch hop, is really important. And I'm gonna be talking about that next week. Yeah, if you have any questions regarding this video, please click the bottom left to tweet them at ARTFX Studios. You can also tweet me requests for future videos, and click the bottom right to go to my website, where you can register on the forum and actually post your music and get some feedback from me or other users, make some friends on the forum, and you know, stay up to date with the upcoming videos. Yeah, if you want to see more of these videos, subscribe to my channel, and happy production. See you next week. Bye.